My dad collapsing in that courtroom after the recording played doesn't make sense. Why would my sister's confession be hidden for years? And who decided it should surface right now at all?
My dad tried to stand up when the audio started playing and missed his chair completely. He hit the courtroom floor so hard even the bailiff froze. Because the woman confessing on that recording was my sister. I was sitting on the bench as the judge in her son's fraud trial when she walked into my courtroom and saw me for the first time in 8 years. My mother started shaking. My sister stopped breathing for a second. And suddenly, the family that erased me from their lives was staring at the man they swore was a criminal. 8 years ago, my sister framed me for stealing law school exam files. My parents believed her instantly. I lost my scholarship, my apartment, my future, everything. They testified against me and told me never to come back. But the second prosecutors recovered that external hard drive in court, my sister panicked. Then the investigator said one sentence that changed the entire room. Your Honor, you need to hear this recording. The courtroom had gone completely silent by then. Not normal courtrooms silent either. I mean the kind where people stop shifting in their seats, stop coughing, stop whispering. Even the court reporter looked nervous. My nephew Evan was sitting at the defense table staring at his mother like he didn't recognize her anymore. And Vanessa, my sister, kept shaking her head before the recording had even started. No, she whispered to her attorney. That's not possible. Before we continue with this video, please like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for updates. I hadn't heard her voice in 8 years. Not since the day my parents stood behind her in a university hearing room while she cried in front of administrators and told them I stole restricted exam files to sell for money. I still remember every detail from that day. My father wouldn't even look at me. My mother cried the entire hearing like I'd already been convicted of something horrible. And Vanessa looked devastated. That was the part that destroyed me later. She looked so convincing that even I started questioning my own memory for a while. The investigators found copied files on my laptop. Fake bank deposits tied to my account. Emails sent from anonymous addresses accusing me before the school even launched the investigation. Everything looked airtight. Too airtight. But nobody cared when I tried to explain that. Not the school. Not my friends. And definitely not my family. Within 2 weeks, my scholarship disappeared. My internship offer vanished. My landlord told me the building wasn't comfortable housing someone involved in fraud allegations. I slept in my car for almost 3 months after that. And during all of it, my sister kept telling everyone she was heartbroken over what I'd done. Then she disappeared from my life completely. For 8 years, not one birthday message. Not one phone call. Nothing. Now she was 20 feet away from me in my courtroom, looking like she'd seen a ghost. The prosecutor finally plugged the recovered hard drive into the evidence system. Vanessa stood up so fast her chair slammed backward onto the floor. And that's when I noticed something that made my stomach turn. Evan looked terrified of his own mother. Not of prison. Not of the courtroom. Her. The investigator opened the audio file. Vanessa took one step toward the defense table and said, very quietly, "If that plays, we're all finished." The next thing I remember was my nephew turning toward his attorney and whispering, "I didn't know she kept it." That sentence stayed in my head. Not "what is that?" Not "this can't be real." He said it like he already knew the recording existed. The prosecutor immediately asked for a brief recess before the audio could be played, and honestly, nobody objected. The entire courtroom felt unstable. Even the deputies looked tense. I stepped into my chambers and shut the door behind me, but my hands still wouldn't stop shaking. 8 years. 8 years of trying to rebuild my life from nothing. And suddenly every piece of it was standing outside my office. A soft knock hit the door. "Your Honor," my clerk said carefully. "There's someone asking to speak with you privately." I already knew. Vanessa walked in before I answered. She looked older than I remembered. Tired. Controlled in the way people look when they're trying not to panic in public. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she looked around my chambers and laughed once under her breath. "So you really became a judge?" I stared at her. "You framed me. Her expression tightened immediately. You don't understand what happened back then. That sentence nearly made me angry enough to forget where I was. What part didn't I understand? I asked. The part where you planted evidence on my laptop? Or the part where Mom and Dad helped destroy my life? She crossed her arms defensively. You always made everything look easy. I actually blinked at her after she said that. Like that explained anything. You think losing 8 years of my life was fair because you were jealous? It wasn't jealousy, she snapped. You were leaving us behind. There it was. The same twisted logic I remembered from years ago. Vanessa had always hated when attention shifted away from her. When I got into law school, our parents couldn't stop talking about it. Meanwhile, she'd just failed out of her accounting program after hiding it from everyone for months. And after that, something changed in her. She told us you stole those files, crying her eyes out. My mother had said back then. Why would she lie? I used to replay that question every night. Now my sister was standing in front of me avoiding eye contact, while an evidence file sat in the next room threatening to expose everything. Then she said something that made the entire situation worse. This isn't about you anymore, she whispered. It's about Evan. Before I could answer, someone started pounding on my chamber door. A deputy opened it immediately. Your Honor, he said sharply, the prosecution just found additional files on the hard drive. And the deputy hesitated. They're dated 3 days before your university investigation began. 3 days before the investigation. That was impossible. According to the university, the evidence against me had been discovered after anonymous complaints were submitted. That timeline was the reason nobody questioned anything. Investigators claimed they reacted quickly once the files appeared. But if forged documents already existed before the accusation started, then somebody had planned the entire thing. I walked back into the courtroom slowly, while attorneys argued, near the prosecution table. Reporters had started gathering outside the viewing windows by then. Word was spreading fast. Vanessa wouldn't look at me anymore. Her son, Evan, looked pale. The prosecutor approached the bench with a stack of printed metadata reports. Your Honor, forensic analysts recovered archived templates from the external drive. Multiple files contain the same formatting signatures connected to the defendant's case. I flipped through the pages carefully. Then my stomach dropped. I recognized the formatting instantly. Years ago, investigators claimed the fake bank screenshots tied to my case came from anonymous sources online. But the spacing errors, the timestamp alignment, the document layering, it was identical. The same person created both sets of evidence. Vanessa. My sister shifted in her seat the second she realized I understood what I was looking at. Then another voice spoke behind the prosecution table. Your Honor, there's something else. One of the investigators handed over a sealed report. Inside was a university memorandum dated 4 years earlier. My disciplinary case had quietly been reviewed internally after concerns about manipulated evidence surfaced during an unrelated fraud audit. The findings were buried. No public correction. No apology. Nothing. I actually had to stop reading for a second. All those years, I thought nobody cared enough to revisit what happened. But they had. They just never told me. Meanwhile, I lost nearly a decade of my life believing the stain on my name would never disappear. Then the courtroom doors opened again. Vanessa's husband rushed inside, looking completely shaken. I need to speak, he said immediately. Her attorney stood up fast. Absolutely not. But he ignored him and looked directly at me. I think Evan found something months ago, he said. Old hard drives. Financial records. After that, Vanessa started acting paranoid. Vanessa stood up instantly. David, stop talking. But he kept going. She blamed Evan before investigators even searched the house. Silence. Pure silence. Even Evan looked stunned hearing his father say it out loud. And, in that moment, the entire case shifted. This wasn't just about fraud anymore. Vanessa hadn't been protecting her son. She'd been protecting herself. Then the lead investigator stepped toward the bench holding a pair of headphones. Your Honor, he said quietly, we finished cleaning the damaged audio file. Vanessa suddenly slammed both hands onto the defense table.
No.
The investigator swallowed hard. You need to hear what your sister says on this recording. The headphones felt heavier than they should have. I stared at them for a second without moving. Across the courtroom, Vanessa looked like she was barely holding herself together. Her makeup had started to run near the corners of her eyes, but she kept trying to sit upright like she could still control the situation. Evan wasn't even looking at her anymore. He was staring at the floor. I finally put the headphones on. The investigator pressed play. At first, all I heard was static. Then Vanessa's voice came through clearly enough to make my chest tighten. He never backs up his files. Once they open the laptop, they'll find exactly what they're supposed to find. I stopped breathing for a second. The recording continued. Another voice asked, "What if he denies it?" Vanessa laughed softly. "He's the responsible one. Nobody questions the responsible one after they fall." The courtroom suddenly felt too small. 8 years of anger hit me all at once. Sleeping in my car outside a grocery store parking lot because I couldn't afford gas. Calling my parents over and over while they ignored me. Watching classmates whisper when I walked past them. And my sister had planned it like it was some kind of strategy. The investigator paused the recording and removed the headphones carefully. "Your Honor," he said quietly, "there's more." The prosecutor immediately requested the audio be entered into evidence. Vanessa's attorney looked physically sick by then. Meanwhile, reporters outside the courtroom were already flooding social media with updates. Through the glass doors, I could see phones pressed against windows. People pointing. Cameras moving. The story was spreading fast. Judge presides over case tied to own family scandal. But then something happened that nobody in that courtroom expected. Evan stood up. His voice shook so badly he could barely get words out. "She told me signing the documents would protect us," he said. I didn't even understand what half of them were. Vanessa turned toward him instantly. "Evan, stop." But he kept talking. "She said if investigators found the old files, our family would be destroyed." My mother covered her mouth with both hands. My father looked like he couldn't process what he was hearing. Then the investigator reopened the audio file. "There's one final section," he announced. Vanessa whispered, "Please don't." Nobody listened. The recording resumed. And this time, my sister said the words that shattered whatever was left of my family. "I framed Elias because I couldn't stand watching everyone choose him over me."
She just said she framed him on that recording. But why does it sound rehearsed, and who kept this hidden all these years?
My father tried to stand up too quickly. His knee hit the chair sideways. And right in the middle of the courtroom, he missed the seat completely and crashed hard onto the floor. The sound echoed through the courtroom. Chairs scraped backward instantly as deputies rushed toward my father. My mother screamed his name and dropped beside him while paramedics stationed downstairs were called up. But even with all the chaos happening around me, I couldn't stop hearing Vanessa's voice in my head. I framed Elias because I couldn't stand watching everyone choose him over me. 8 years. 8 years destroyed over jealousy. The courtroom was temporarily cleared while paramedics checked my father for a possible concussion. Reporters crowded the hallway outside. Attorneys whispered into phones. Court officers tried keeping people separated while news alerts started exploding online. And through all of it, Vanessa sat completely still at the defense table, like she finally understood there was nowhere left to run. When proceedings resumed nearly 40 minutes later, the prosecutor formally entered the recording into evidence along with the recovered files from the external drive. Then came the part that somehow hurt worse than the confession itself. The forensic analyst explained everything step by step. The planted university files, the fabricated bank screenshots, the anonymous emails sent from encrypted accounts tied back to Vanessa's devices. She had built the entire case against me herself. Carefully, patiently. And she reused the same methods years later while manipulating financial documents connected to Evan's case. My nephew started crying quietly halfway through the testimony. Not dramatic crying. Just the kind people do when their entire reality collapses in public. "I thought he abandoned us," Evan whispered at one point, looking toward me for the first time all day. That's what she told me. I didn't even know how to answer that. Because technically, I had disappeared. After the disciplinary hearing, there wasn't much left of my life to stay for. The prosecutor then made an announcement that changed the direction of the case entirely. Based on the recovered evidence and audio confession, investigators no longer considered Evan the primary architect of the fraud scheme. Evidence supported coercion and manipulation by Vanessa over an extended period of time. Vanessa finally reacted then. Not with denial. Not with outrage. She just looked exhausted, like the weight of 8 years had finally crushed her. 2 deputies approached her carefully as the prosecutor requested immediate charges for evidence tampering, fraud, obstruction, and conspiracy-related offenses tied both to the current investigation and the reopened review of my university case. My mother started sobbing the second they placed Vanessa in handcuffs. My father couldn't even look at me anymore. And honestly, that hurt more than I expected, because part of me still wanted them to say this had all been some terrible mistake. But it wasn't. It was a choice. A choice they made the day they decided my sister's tears mattered more than my voice. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed the exits. Cameras followed every movement as officers escorted Vanessa into a transport vehicle. That's when my father finally approached me. Slowly, carefully, like he wasn't sure he still had the right. He looked older than I remembered. Smaller somehow. "We should have believed you," he said quietly. I stared at him for a long moment. 8 years of birthdays missed. 8 years of silence. 8 years of rebuilding my life, completely alone. And the truth was there wasn't anything he could say anymore that would return those years to me. "You already made your choice," I told him. He started crying before I even walked away. A month later, the university publicly cleared my disciplinary record after reopening the case. Former classmates started reaching out after seeing the news coverage. The state bar issued a formal statement acknowledging the fraud tied to my expulsion. But the strangest part? None of it felt as important as I thought it would. Because clearing your name doesn't magically erase what happened while it was ruined. Vanessa remained in custody awaiting trial. Evan moved in with relatives on his father's side. And me? A few weeks later, I drove past the grocery store parking lot where I used to sleep in my car after losing everything. I sat there for a minute without getting out. Then I looked at the courthouse skyline in the distance, started the engine, and drove away. This time, nobody could erase me anymore.
After hearing something like this in a real courtroom, how many other cases may be built on hidden recordings nobody ever questions? Until everything is already destroyed like this happens.